If I'm able to make this look easy, then I must be doing my job. Every route I run, every catch I make, every touchdown I score, it all comes from the work. It's easy to get caught up in the things that don't matter. But where I'm trying to go, I have to continue to work hard, put my head down, clock in, and do the work. Know your footwork, perfect your craft, make sure you're strong off the line, and you gotta put in the work when nobody's watching. You want results? Stick to the basics. They'll never fail you.
Okay, so change of pace. I'm not at my house, I'm actually in Utah, and I might have just kicked Brady out of the room. So today we're not exactly going to talk about camera gear, we're going to talk about actually using the thing, particularly on a client gig. It just so happens that this particular client gig is probably going to haunt me for a really long time. I'm going to talk about a shoot where everything I kind of wanted to go right didn't go exactly my way, but also why my opinion kind of doesn't matter once it goes to a client, but well, we'll get there. So I don't know if you guys know this, but I still do work with different clients outside of this YouTube channel. I've been working with a supplement company called Basic Nutrition. They've just started to hit the market. We have been working on some content assets for them over the last couple of months. One of the more recent ones, we actually got to go to the University of Buffalo, where we got to work with rookie Keon Coleman from the Buffalo Bills. The goals of this shoot was we had to make one 30-second ad and also a 15-second cut as well. There was a couple parameters in terms of the shoot as to why the deliverables were so small, but in terms of being able to do that structured shoot, plan for it, and also crew for it, we still need to do a lot of planning, which happened about a month before. Now, I use my normal planning structure on Milanote. This is where I find my inspiration and some of the reference footage that I do use, and as well as creating a shot list to make sure that we get everything we needed for on the ad on the day, especially if we have to make any re-edit cuts, or if we need the opportunity later on, if we have to recut another ad, I can just pay my editor a little bit more money and we have extra assets that we could use for that client. But here's the problem though. Whenever you're working with a professional athlete, especially when they're in season, at the time the NFL season is still going on. In fact, if you're watching this video, playoffs just started, so we're not even really fully at the end of the season. But when you are working with athletes that are in season, you have a very finite amount of time to actually work with anybody. With Keon, we only had about 3 hours. We were shooting about 11 till 2 o'clock. We had to get all the shots that we needed, and we had to act pretty quickly. Now, Rome wasn't built in a day, there's no I in team, so I actually did crew up a little bit from home and a little bit out of town as well. I brought some of my usual crew members, especially some familiar faces you might have seen from the Bronco video that I did a little while ago, as well as I hired some crew out from Connecticut to drive up to Buffalo in order to get this done. The only one-wheel operator that I know that could do a great job is going to be Tom Shaw. He's somebody that I follow on Instagram quite a bit. We've connected a couple of times, and actually now we just talk trash to each other about who's going to go to the gym enough times to be in shape for NAB 2025. It's probably not going to be me. We also have Navon as well, who's going to help out with some audio stuff. He's also going to help with lighting and also be a camera tech for me as well. And when Tom was on the one wheel for some shots, I had to play first AC and pull focus for him. Now, whenever you have a shoot that's not going to have a lot of time, one of the things that you can use to mitigate that or try to make the best of it is to make sure that you have your schedule and your crew on point. I spent a lot of time creating a schedule of events to make sure that we got the shots we needed, because not only did we have to go to the University of Buffalo to shoot this in 3 hours, we also had 3 locations for this shoot, which probably was a bit overzealous, but we were asked to get them done and we were paid to get them done, so we had to make it happen one way or another. Typically for me, when I'm shooting a lot more fitness-based stuff, you can get a lot more shots than what you bargained for, provided that you actually have the timing that you need in terms of your scheduling to make sure that you could pull things off. Now, for different situations and for different reasons, we kind of started the shoot a little bit later. That 11 o'clock start time started to be 11:45. We showed up a couple of hours early to make sure that the lights were in position, to make sure that our 6x was set up, especially when we were shooting outside, to block out the sun and diffuse it. And even then, we still didn't have enough time because we started about 45 minutes late and we still had 3 locations, an hour at each one. I'm used to moving pretty quickly, especially for some of these quick and dirty fitness ads, but this was probably the most challenging one yet. We got a couple of hero shots and a couple of prep shops with Keon at the beginning. We actually got on the one wheel where Tom got to shine and use the Pyxis on there as well. And even though that wasn't enough, we still had to move indoors in order to get some of the shots in terms of training at the field house and also get our lines delivered, and we had to get a bunch of shots at the gym. It was a lot of things to actually try to fit into one day and maybe a little bit ambitious. One of the things that's going to happen when you're a DP and you're in charge of a lot of things is plan for things to go wrong. And even planning for things to go wrong, things will actually go wrong on top of the original stuff that doesn't necessarily go your way. Now, not that it's the most important part of the video, but people are going to ask what we shot on, what are some of the tools that we used while we were on set. Now, in terms of the camera package, we're using a Blackmagic Pyxis. This was my first production that was on this. I've practiced with it a lot, I've tested it a lot, and a lot of the images looked really, really good, which also is probably the fault of the fact that this is my first time running a production on the Pyxis with the brand new Cook SB3s that are made for L-mount, which is a video that's going to come out later on. Or it already came out, I actually don't know the order of my own videos. Now, one of the things that people might have a question about is whether or not the rolling shutter is something that's a detriment when you're working on some of these faster paced shoots, or the fact that because the Pyxis needs a little bit more rigging, does that slow you down, and was it a contributing factor to actually making things a little bit harder with a time constraint? Personally, for me, if I have things rigged up and I have multiple different ways of doing things and making it more versatile, it didn't bother things or slow things down too much. For the most part, I did use things handheld, and I was using an easy rig for the majority of the shots we were getting. Whenever we needed to use it on a one wheel, we just took a couple of the parts off, and we had Tom on a one wheel riding on the track while Kian was getting some of the shoots that I got from my inspiration. I actually took a little bit of inspo from an LT commercial a little while ago, although we didn't have the budget for a bunch of football players to be there, and also we didn't have the time to set it up quite the same way, so we just settled for some shots running down the sideline and running routes. Now, other things we added into our kit was the DJI transmission system. I did use the SDRs for this. Now, this actually worked pretty well. We weren't incredibly far in terms of distance between the camera and where I was pulling focus from, so it was really nice to do, especially when Tom was on a one wheel. The SDR transmission system is also small and compact, so making sure that you don't have too many things going on, because one wheeling is probably dangerous while operating a camera, worked out really well in terms of being able to pull focus. Now, I did use the DJI Focus hand wheel. It's a little bit different than the Focus Pro package, but it's a nice big wheel. It's easy to pull focus on, and I did use it on a spare monitor that I had in my kit. If you haven't figured out exactly what the problem could have been with this shoot and why this is going to keep me up at night, it was a time constraint. With everything said and done, between starting a little bit late, between some of the lighting changes, between some of the technical things we had to figure out on set on the fly, that 3-hour shoot was more like an hour and 45 minutes to try to get a very ambitious 22 shots between 3 locations. There was also other things we had to keep in mind as well, making sure that we got out of the way of the university team that was still practicing, and as well as they oddly enough had a game in the middle of the week that was going to be on NBC as well, so they had their crews setting up, so we also had to avoid them and avoid some obstacles as well. Now, this is something where I have to be a little bit more self-aware, maybe just shut up a little bit. Now, I planned this thing out to the nines. I made sure that everything was scheduled to a T, and even then there were some things that still went wrong. And one of the things that was going on in the back of my mind, especially on the way home from the shoot, was how much better I could have done and how much more cinematic the shoot would have looked, or how much better this would have looked on my portfolio. And kind of thinking a little bit about myself and what it's going to do for me as a filmmaker, and sometimes that might get in the way of some of your client work where ultimately that's the person who's paying for you to shoot. Setting off the footage for the shoot was incredibly stressful. I messaged my editor Zach and I said you might have to work some magic because we just didn't get enough stuff in my eyes. We got a couple of shots that looked cool, we got a couple of things that might look good for like a YouTube test video, but I didn't feel like we got enough for this ad, and it had to do with a lot of things falling apart on set, especially with a really small time constraint. Now, could we have gotten a more bigger time constraint? Absolutely not, actually, because it's still in season. We can't really pull somebody away from the professional career for that long, or the client has to pay way more money, which I don't think they were prepared to do. Now, the reason why everything that I said in terms of my own personal feelings about the shoot, not feeling like I got everything that I wanted and was a little bit fearful of actually turning around this project because I just didn't think it was going to do well and perhaps I wouldn't have gotten called again, that was the one shoot that we've ever done where we actually didn't really have any notes. When Zach sent the first cut of that edit, they really had no notes whatsoever except taking out some of the branding in terms of the ad because we can't use different logos. Something that stressed me out so much when I turned over the footage and kind of just hoped for the best and hoped that I didn't completely ruin myself and embarrass myself ended up being something that was really good in the client's eyes, which is something that's a little bit rare because usually it goes the opposite direction if you guys worked professionally with different clients before. Something that I learned on the shoot is once it gets into the hands of somebody else, once you've posted that thing to the internet or you've sent over that client project, your opinion kind of doesn't matter that much. Now, at the end of the day, you want to be happy with your work. You want to be happy with the things that you're doing. You want to feel confident and sound as a filmmaker or a cinematographer or someone who's in a leadership role. But at the end of the day, as long as you follow the steps that you need to, even when things go wrong, Most clients can understand when a 3-hour shoot outside of your control gets shaved off by almost half, and you just give whatever you can give, and then you live to fight another day, and you try again the next time, and you take notes, and you make those improvements. Especially when you're working with new clients. You might have some clients that have certain budgets and need to work in certain time constraints, and albeit the proper way of being able to do an ad or commercial would maybe be a more fuller day and more access to things. Not everybody is starting from that position, and truthfully, we got paid really well, all things considered. So I can still buy Christmas presents at the end of the day. My clients are super happy. We're working with them again pretty much through all of 2025 on a retainer. And at the same time, I have some footage that I could talk about the Cook SB3s, and I got my first run in some live fire with the Pyxis. Now, could this commercial be a lot better? Could there have been better shots? Could there have been more variety? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, this is a client project that you're working on. And sometimes the reality is you don't have a 5-star film every time you're working on client stuff. But there's still things that you could learn, things that you could teach, and things that you could talk about in a video. Kind of like I just did right now. That being said, if you guys want to see another video just like this, I'm going on a little bit of a story time because, believe it or not, I still work with clients outside of YouTube. And some of them have a couple of learning lessons, and well, some of them are going to haunt me until the day that I die. Kind of like this one. YouTube also probably thinks you want to watch a video somewhere over here. So I'll see you in the next one. Peace.